lawyer Manar Zaiter. Good morning, Zahra. Good morning, everyone. My name is Manar Zaiter from Lebanon. I was asked to moderate the second session of this regional workshop where we will discuss people-centered policies. And to start with, we can say that the situation that has been discussed in the morning shows the extent to which we failed to implement people-centered policies, and particularly in the last 5 years. And of course, I will not anticipate the evidence, and I will not anticipate the testimonies in this regard, but all the reports and all the studies have shown so far that we have failed to fill in the inequalities and to fill in the gaps at many levels in our region. So maybe we need today to enlarge our understanding and our perception of people-centered approaches, and especially as civil society organizations. We will have 3 speakers in this session, and we will try to present 3 examples in order to look deeply into what people-centered policies and how are and how they should be. So based on the current situation that we are going through in our region and in the world, we will try to answer 2 questions with Dr. Gihan Abouzeid. So what are the issues and what are the social sectors or social groups that are more affected than others by the negative effects of the COVID-19? Second question, 5 years after the adoption of this agenda, and in addition to all of the human rights criteria, what are the measures to be taken in order not to leave anyone behind? So our first speaker, Dr. Gihan Abouzeid, will try to answer these questions. She is an expert of the German International Cooperation. She is also member of the Egyptian participation of women. She is also member of many other organizations. She is a regional consultant working with the regional parliament, working on policies to promote gender equality, and she also works with several UN agencies. Dr. Gihan, we give you 10 minutes because our time is very limited.
الو، مساء الخير.
عم نسمعك، تفضل.
اهلا بيكي منار. الصوت كان فيه شويه. مساء الخير عليكي، الف شكر للتقديم. مساء الخير على كل الاصدقاء والصديقات، وبشكر بشكر الشبكه كالعاده، هي تستضيفنا وتجمع الاحباب.
Thank you, Manar. I would like to thank everyone, to thank all the dear friends who are with us today. I have prepared a presentation, but and I will try to be very brief. So regarding the first question, as Manar said, I will be answering 2 questions. So the first question, why do we have these disparities and what are the gaps?
الدولة الريعية وحول
the rentier state and rentier economies, the Arab region is facing the fluctuation of oil prices. We are not industrial or productive societies, and some countries started closing down their strategic factories in a step that is widely disapproved. The other resources in the rentier economies are also controlled for political reasons, depending on political wills, and they are given to the private sector that supports the elite. we witness a complete control of globalization, and we focus on the health nowadays in privatizing economies, as well as introducing healthcare in a way that is almost inexistent. We lack governance, as mentioned by my colleague Sausan, and this is one of the issues that are faced in the Arab world. Also, Sausan talked about corruption and the relationship between businessmen and the political powers. All this leads to a fall in the economic and the social structure due to the wars, that is exacerbated due to the wars and the political instability in different dimensions. Another phenomenon is the setting of priorities. Given the decreased development indicators in the Arab world, the military spending in the Arab world in 2017 reached 20% of government spending, compared with 6.3 on the global level. The difference is frightening the Arab region. In 2016, the spending on on health as part of the GDP is less than half compared with the global spending. The same applies to education, while we remain suffering, and we are the least among the countries that spend the least on research and development. We lack a clear structure or beginning of spending on research and development. Accordingly, we are among the least countries that focus on spending in healthcare services and the readiness for emergencies and planning this response. All this led to the exponential growth and increase in the different or in the migration, which led to differences in development among regions and among persons. Of course, the infrastructure, the health infrastructure is deteriorating, and I'm not going to delve into their details because they have been mentioned. There are differences among persons. 50% of the people receive only 9%
من إجابة موجودة دائما ما بين المنطقة العربية. Okay, Manar?
I think we're losing the speaker.
وإذا ممكن تفتحي.
We cannot hear you.
ترى جيهان سوري كتير على المقاطعة.
لا أنا فتحتش الفيديو لأنه كان mute.
I'm not using the video because it was not able to do so. So.
تلك الأسس هي أيضا مدعومة.
All these are supported by different reasons, and I have 4 minutes left. These are based on historical foundations, such as the occupation that dilapidated our resources, as well as economic and political and cultural reasons that reinforce this difference. And there are a lot to be said on the cultural aspects of these differences in our region. What are and who are the categories that are affected mostly by this pandemic. The region includes more than 55 million persons that require assistance, including refugees, migrants, and unemployed. Some reports stated that they can form a rather big country in the region. The pressure is increasing on women, and I know that there is another presentation that will focus on women. Among the marginalized categories are the small and medium enterprises that stopped working and their employees that are suffering. In addition, all workers in the tourism sector were key, who were among those who have lost a lot. They have been marginalized, and this will be addressed in another session. Children are divided into two categories. The poorest children who were at the risk of social or school dropout, and they are present in the Arab world, in the different region in the Arab world, and other children who lost the ability to study when distance learning started, and they are marginalized. 51% of the Arab region are connected, residents are connected to the internet, and this does not mean that the internet is, or the quality of the connection is good. The internet covers Qatar totally, for example, but covers only 30% of Sudan. And we're talking here about a drop in the quality of education. Informal work and workers were among the categories that were dramatically affected because they use or they rely on the formal work, and the formal sector does not rely on the informal workers. Accordingly, women workers in the informal sector in general are the majority of the workers, and this is another blow dealt to women. Domestic workers lost a lot of job opportunities across the regions. Women are also subject to violence to a point where the United Nations said that this is the shadow pandemic in parallel to COVID because of the widespread domestic violence practices against women and children. Other segments that suffered during Corona are the prisoners that suffer greatly, and no governments have released the prisoners of opinion, at least. Workers in the healthcare sector who are considered also marginalized, unfortunately, because they were in the front line of those who were facing COVID. However, they lacked any supporting tools, PPE, they lacked support in their household or an enabling environment that support and helped them, contrary to what was mentioned in the International Covenant on Socioeconomic Rights. So these healthcare workers can be included in the marginalized sections or segments. So there is a lack in available resources and mismanagement, a lack of capabilities and information. In general, there are factors that led to the to these issues, such as the absence of rules, regulations, policies. The geography also played an important role in this pandemic because the inhabitants of border regions and remote regions were not taken into account. Cultural factors played a role, either due to extreme poverty. Some persons accepted everything that was fed to them without critical thinking, and they were on the receiving end because they are used to suffering losses. One last point, the Arab government performance and rhetoric in general was highly patriarchal. And it was threatening people and blaming them for the responsibility of the spread of the pandemic. Other countries were dealing with the citizens properly.
هذه الجائحة في حين أنه كثير من الدول وهنا أقارن باستجابات دول الأخرى
compared with other responses in other countries, the marginalized became even more marginalized and did not receive the support contrary to certain developed countries, which requires us to revisit the relief and support policies. I think that I exceeded the time that was given to me, so I will stop at this point. Thank you, Dr. Gihan. Unfortunately, we have to stop at this point. Thank you for highlighting important points that I will not repeat. We move on to another indicator of the policies that were not human rights based. We give the floor to Sylvanna Lakkis, who will try to address 2 points. What are the measures that were taken in the region pertaining to the access of the persons with or special needs persons to the policies that were developed? How did these policies increase inequality towards persons with special needs? Are there any specific recommendations that we can raise in order to address the challenges of development faced by persons with special needs? Sylvanna Lakkis from Lebanon is an expert in the rights of persons with special needs, gender, on the regional and national level. She is the executive director of the Lebanese handicapped organization, and she's a member of several national, regional, and international consultative boards, and plays a prominent role in voicing the violations that persons with special needs face in Lebanon and in the region. And she promotes the policies of the World Bank and other frameworks focusing on the rights of persons with special needs. Please switch on your camera if you can. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Manar. I would like to thank ANND for holding this forum. I participate today as a representative of the Arab Forum for persons with special needs. As you said, I was asked to address 2 key points. However, maybe I should begin with asking a key question. Who are for the persons with special needs, and what is handicap? How can we define it? It is a lie created by the person or by human beings and transformed into a reality that managed to impose itself and caused until now the marginalization and isolation and ostracization of persons with special needs, knowing that international reports and indicators show that handicap has been a part of everyone's lives in different times, and it does not take into account gender, age, or geographic locations. Therefore, when we talk about a problematic made by a misunderstanding of persons and special needs, we talk about everyone. However, we have yet to understand the root causes of this position sufficiently and properly in order to put an end to its repercussions. Therefore, until today in the Arab region, and before I talk about COVID pandemic, so Arab countries heavily use the policy of marginalization in planning and social work. Therefore, until today, and in spite of signing the International Agreement on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, we still see that the majority of those persons live under the poverty line. They are excluded from any response to plan, and persons with disabilities are suffering, are at the core of all disasters, be them hunger or other pandemics such as limited resources or state resources. In Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, we can paint a more dramatic picture. 6.7 million persons now suffer from permanent disabilities. When we talk about the refugees with a disability in Lebanon are required to be able to continue living their lives in refugee camps, where it is impossible to access services, to live in an independent manner, and to meet the requirements of daily life. These are not reflected in the plans, in the policies, or in the rhetoric. The rentier policies are adopted and supported in a way or another. What I mean is that a number of persons with disabilities are included or put in special institutions where they are taken care of, and they call this care. This goes with disabilities are unable to join the job market, universities, enroll in schools, etc., because this diversity is not taken into account either in urban planning or construction or industry, these projects and achievements are not always based on accessibility standards. Regarding the challenges, compounded challenges by COVID-19 pandemic, they are numerous. Citizens should have sufficient information to ensure prevention, and when this information was drafted, they did not take into account how they can be adapted and delivered to persons with disability or their caretakers. This means that this category is at risk because it lacks information and it is more at risk than others. We all know that persons with disabilities suffer and are most at risk to have or to suffer from COVID-19. Despite the situation, a country like Lebanon that pretends or proclaims development and civilization, they did not include the persons with disabilities to receive the vaccine. When we enroll online, the form that we have to fill does not include any question on disability. So how can relevant authorities know when this category of persons will receive the vaccine? With regards to the quarantine, no mechanisms to guarantee or ensure inclusion of persons with disabilities in the treatment process if they suffer from COVID or if they need to be treated or transported to hospitals. No measures were taken in the majority of Arab countries, including Lebanon. If they had a plan or project to support persons staying at home due to COVID, no more than 10% of the persons living with disabilities were included. So most persons with disabilities are high risk now, because usually they rely on their families to ensure their livelihoods, and these families are now unemployed and they lack the financial resources to ensure their basic survival, without talking about the persons with extreme disabilities that require more stringent measures, such as the persons with respiration problems, for example. Regarding the service mechanisms, it is unclear, it is not transparent, it is not available for persons to register a complaint or to ask for relief and support. Persons with disabilities are requested or expected to continue working as if COVID-19 does not exist, which puts them at risk. A lot more can be said, but I'd like to move to the recommendations. If we go back to the objectives of this forum, we will find the same problems: the absence of inclusive and comprehensive standards, absence of policies, absence of conducive environment, work-related matters. What is the situation of how are the persons with disabilities going back to work once the pandemic ends, especially after the increase in unemployment rates? Usually this category of persons and women are often the first ones to suffer. Basically, your time has come to an end. Can you please give us the final recommendations? Regarding the recommendations, I'd like to talk about the partnership with civil society organizations. We need to work with these CSOs that are replacing the state. The civil society organizations have to focus on knowledge production regarding integration, rights, and diversity. It has to develop partnership mechanisms in order for the CSOs to promote their role in transitioning into an inclusive development strategy. Also, social expenses should be monitored in order to ensure or to improve coverage, including persons with disabilities, by creating a framework to support inclusive financial policies to implement SDGs. Therefore, policies should be in line with budgets. Decent work needs to be included. Policies should be reviewed to include standards and accountability measures. Regarding COVID-19, I think it is important and imperative to review the current strategy and include the required measures to ensure these policies are diverse and inclusive of persons with disabilities. It is also important to take all required measures to ensure effective participation of different social classes and categories in the planning, review, monitoring, and evaluation by including representatives, in addition to the grassroots participation, ensure availability of rights, access to public or to different services, regardless of the disability, develop effective mechanisms to monitor violations and different forms of violence, including multifaceted violence, gender-based or disability-based violence. Also, different measures have to be taken in order to ensure accessibility to prevention from violence services. Also, long-term and medium-term policies should be drafted to build a new system that allows inclusive work according to the basis that, or to the foundations and principles that ensure proper distribution of resources and access to justice. Accessibility to buildings and roads or infrastructure should be the main category to approve or to provide the building permits. Thank you for your attention and apologies for any delay. Thank you, Sylvanna, for this in-depth presentation. We move to the last intervention in this session.
So we move to the last topic of our session. We cannot speak about sustainable development without talking about women and women's rights, especially in light of the inequalities that is still faced by our women and girls in the region. With our speaker, we are going to answer two questions. Where is the region from reaching the sustainable development goals, and particularly or especially that the objective related to women and girls is a cross-cutting topic throughout all of these 17 topics. Our speaker will be talking, about the indicators, about the challenges and the multidimensional challenges faced by women and girls in the region. Our speaker is an advisor with the Arab Center for Women. He is also a program coordinator within this center. He is a member of the experts committee of the United Nations Development Committee working on development projects for Tunisia. He is a trainer and has many studies and reports about strategic planning, people's development. Dr. Ahmed, we give you the floor. You have 10 minutes and then we can have 10 minutes of discussion with the group. Thank you, Dr. Manar. Thanks, everyone. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you might be joining this session from. So in these 10 minutes, I will be talking about gender equality in light of the national Arab reports, voluntary reports. And in fact, this matter has been highlighted in the 7th report about the report on women development issued by the Kauthar Center. And we have also elaborated a paper including or covering all of the Arab countries since 2016. I will start my presentation. So I will be a bit selective in order not to take more time. I will just start with some primary remarks. So this paper, as I have said, presents an overview of the position or of the attention that is given to gender equality and to women's and girls' rights in the Arab region. It highlights the commonalities that we can find in all Arab countries when it comes to dealing with women and girls. And this paper is not considered an analysis or a critic of the mentioned reports, but it is also a monitoring paper for gender equality. And there is one last observation in the paper. So we only mentioned some countries as examples. Just very quickly, we can say that 19 Arab states have already submitted 22 reports so far. Egypt, Qatar, and Morocco have submitted 2 reports, and we have 5 other Arab countries that will be submitting their reports in 2021. And a quick review and analysis of these reports from a gender equality perspective shows that there are many messages and conclusions to highlight. So, first, we have noticed that 16 out of the 22 reports have dedicated a chapter or a paragraph for the Sustainable Development Goal 5, SDG 5. Other reports, 14 out of 22, have focused on SDG 10 and considered the gender equality as a general topic without really focusing on the gender dimension. In other reports, we have seen that gender equality has been tackled under different objectives, under different SDGs like 3, 4, and other SDGs. In some reports, they highlighted issues related to households, families, without really focusing on the issue of gender. Some reports submitted by countries going through conflicts and wars, of course, were specifically not focusing on this dimension and mainly focused on the political and developmental dimensions more. So regarding the content of these reports and the aspects of these reports, we can say that the Arab states have made a lot of progress towards positive change in their attempts to achieve more gender equalities. So in general, there are legal reforms, there are political and policies and strategies that have been adopted and that are directly or indirectly related to this matter, and there are other measures taken by the different states. However, gender equality, the issue of gender equality is not tackled with the same attention or importance in different reports and in different countries. So in some reports, we have seen that enough attention has been given to gender equality, while in other reports, the attention was not sufficient. In addition to that, most of the reports contain the similar elements. They listed the institutional mechanism related to women issues. They listed the national strategies, referring to them as a reference framework. They listed some of the measures taken by the state in order to promote gender equality. Regarding the elements that are related to this content, we can see that the first element is gender equality in constitutions and general policies. And there is always a link between the gender or between sustainable development agenda and the constitutions and public policies, as if we are trying to justify that through our constitutions and public policies, we have already met these development goals. Another element to highlight is the fact that very often some reports consider that whenever the state or the government has adopted an overall methodology that ensures full inclusion and participation of citizens, then they consider that gender equality is also addressed. In addition, a lot of reports have mentioned the international agreements and conventions that they had ratified and that consecrate gender equality and women empowerment. And of course, at the institutional level, there are many indicators or many mentions to the fact that national plans are including the access of women empowerment and institutional empowerment in including the gender dimension. Like, for example, in the report of Oman, where they spoke about mechanisms that are interested in gender equality and inclusion of the gender dimension. There were also mentions about the financement of plans that aim at promoting gender equality. With regards to social participation, ownership, and naturalization, we have seen in the reports the efforts deployed by the relevant countries in order to raise awareness towards the importance of Agenda 2030 and the importance of implementing or achieving the SDGs in general and including stakeholders, etc., and promoting their ownership of these the causes mentioned by the agenda. We have seen an important role played or given to the civil society organizations and public and private sector. In addition to that, several reports have highlighted the cultural obstacles and some traditional practices that might hinder the implementation of gender equality. Furthermore, in some reports, like the report of Egypt, Morocco, and Oman, have highlighted the efforts and measures taken in order to implement the agenda. However, very few were the reports that mentioned that. Another element related to data and indicators, most of the reports have mentioned the issue of availability of data and considered this availability of data as one of the challenges. However, of course, this varied from a report to the other. And what we have noticed in most of the reports as well, we noticed that in the review of SDG 5 and other SDGs, the assessments were not based on accurate indicators or on accurate measures. So, for example, the report would say, well, we have reached the average of that much, or the percentage of women in the parliament is that much, without really basing this on accurate indicators. And all the reports, except that of Egypt, did not use the monitoring tables that are based on the on the global sustainable development indicator. Dr. Ahmed, please, I have to remind you that you still have 2 minutes as Manar. So please, if you can just move to the conclusion. So a fifth element is the gender rights and reproduction rights. So most of the reports also tackle the issue of reproductive health, whether under SDG 3 or under SDG 5. However, they were not very obvious in addressing it as a right or from a rights perspective. Some of the reports also highlighted the challenges and included the recommendations, but these recommendations were not very profound. And despite all this, we have seen that there were many exceptional initiatives related to gender equalities and that were launched in some countries and were included in the voluntary reports. And of course, I choose from these initiatives, for example, the inclusion of a project or the initiative for education for sustainable development in schools. In Tunisia and Morocco, for example, the establishment of committees to follow up on matters related to gender equality. In Morocco, for example, a special competition has been organized to recruit female professors at universities. So these were one of the So these were some of the initiatives that were launched in some countries and related to gender equality. In conclusion, and very quickly, I can say that national reports, and despite what they reflect of the relative progress and of course different progress from a country to the other when it comes to gender equality and women capacitation, and despite the fact that they included very brave and courageous initiatives sometimes, but these reports were not really sufficient and did not fully meet the matter or the requirements related to the matter of gender equality, and the approach was not really and fully appropriate. And in many of these reports, we have seen that there was a timid and very modest highlight of some important topics that would affect the women empowerment and would help in achieving gender equality, such as advocacy, education on rights, and the role of the media, etc. And finally, I would like to highlight the impacts of COVID-19 on Arab women. So in this table, You can see a series of indicators to follow up on sustainable development goals and the trends in the Arab countries. This table is particularly made for SDG 3 and SDG 5, and you can see that SDG 5 in all the Arab countries is still red, which means that we still have a lot of challenges, and if the situation doesn't change, we will not be able to meet SDG 5, while in SDG 3 you will see less red dots, but still the red dots numbers are somehow high. And finally, we can say that the Arab states need to get out of the political structures, the straining political structures, and focus on holistic review of gender equality and other matters in order to properly assess our progress and to know what we still need to do in order to meet all these objectives. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. And maybe we can say that if the situation of women remain the same, then we will not be able to achieve any of the SDGs. We still have 5 to 7 minutes. We will choose 2 to 3 interventions or questions. So as I see, two hands raised. Mr. Abdel Hakim, we give you the floor. Good afternoon, everyone. I am from Palestine. I would like to thank Sylvanna, who spoke about disabilities, because I'm very interested in this matter. I am actually working on this matter in Palestine, and I work with people with disabilities in Palestine, and very often the main request of people with disabilities was to have their rights for social participation, and lately they have also raised the issue of the right to work, because the right to work is the starting point to be able to enjoy other rights like rights to education, right to healthcare, etc. So I know that this might be a challenge for employers. However, this is a very important matter, and we have to include the issue of the right of people with disabilities to work, because this is also a basic right and basic guarantee for people with disability, and it could open and pave the way for them to access the productivity market. I can see that another person is raising their hand, but I cannot read your name. Please. I'm sorry, I cannot read the name, but I can read Passant at Math Peace, Egypt.
صوتي واضح؟
واضح، تفضلي رجاء.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your valuable intervention. My name is Passant. I'm from Egypt. My question is regarding to SDG 3 and SDG 5. And if we look at the COVID, terrorism, and women, and the link between the three, and of course the impact on SDG 3 and SDG 5. So we have seen that year 2020, in year 2020, we have seen, of course, a close link between the re-emergence of terrorist activities and the spread of COVID-19, and we have seen that the pandemic situation has been exploited by terrorist groups to recruit more people. It was exploited also to revive their dormant cells. And we have also seen that they exploited the idea of early marriage. Please, dear participant, if you have a question, please go ahead with your question. We cannot take an intervention. Just a question, please. What is your question? Okay, so my question is, what is the role of Arab CSOs to reduce this relationship between COVID-19 and its impact on SDG 5? Thank you. So we have a question on the chat, and then two quick questions. Ms. Nejma.
شكرا تحية لكل المنظمين.
Thank you, and a big thank you to the speakers and the organizers. My question is to Mr. Ahmed Abdennahder Kauthar.
مدى يعني الاستفادة من تجارب الجمعيات.
So how can we benefit from the experiences of feminist groups?
التعمق في المؤشرات، مؤشرات التمييز.
In order to deepen our understanding of the non-discrimination indicators and indicators related to SDG 3 and 5 and how can we benefit from the experiences especially in light of the absence of laws that guarantee gender equality. One last question, Ms. Suraya. I'm sorry, I cannot take
شكرا سيدتي. وفي الحقيقة أن الرصد الذي قدمه المتدخلون في
the presentations made by I'm sorry, but we cannot hear the speaker. Apparently, she has a connection problem. Miss Suraya.
بالمساواة بين الجنسين.
Miss Suraya, we cannot hear you.
ما بعرف شو صار. فقدنا الاتصال بأستاذة سوريا. راح أعود.
So I'm sorry, but we lost the connection with Miss Suraya.
لا في مشكلة بالصوت.
بتغلق الميكروفون
عندك. يا ريت تكتب السؤال.
عم حاول إلا أني ساعة. طيب عذرا أستاذة سوريا.
We apologize, Miss Suraya. So one final question to Mr. Ahmed. What are the Arab reports that focused on the gender inequalities in the Arab world that are worth reading? Dr. Gihan, do you have any addition to respond to the participants' questions? So I would like to thank all the participants for their questions. Unfortunately, time is very limited, but regarding the question, of course, on the link between terrorism and women, of course, there is a very obvious exploitation of women by terrorist groups. Women are first victims of terrorism. We have more than 40,000 women and with their children who are victims of sexual exploitation by terrorist groups between Syria and Iraq. Of course, COVID-19 has also been exploited. We still do not have any information about the situation in these camps, in these in these camps and the places where these women are kept by terrorist groups. And I believe, of course, that the COVID-19 pandemic will still be exploited by terrorist groups. And unfortunately, we are expecting to have more victims, unfortunately. Thank you, Dr. Gihan. Sylvanna, very quickly, I think there was a question to you. Please, can you repeat the question because I haven't heard any question addressed to me. So it was an intervention about the right to work for people with disabilities. So it was an observation more than a question, actually. So I have already said and mentioned the extent to which COVID-19 has negatively affected people with disabilities. And of course, the right to work is one of the basic rights to everyone, including to people with disabilities. So I will not repeat what I have already said, but we just need to remember. And I was interested by the syndicate or by the person who said that syndicates are providing opportunities, although these can be costly. And as whenever you say these are costly, it shows that your understanding is still is still not appropriate because all rights are costly. You shouldn't be looking at the cost. You should be looking at the right itself, no matter what it takes. So the agenda is here to promote the rights and promote equality. If we want to promote equality, we have to change our mentality. We have to adopt holistic approaches that take into consideration everyone and takes into consideration diversity. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to ensure sustainability. We wouldn't be able to promote rights. And in Palestine, people with disabilities do not only face challenges with regards to how the system or how the state is considering their matters, but they also have other challenges related to occupation. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. We give you 30 seconds to respond to the questions addressed to you. Okay, thank you. To which extent we can benefit from the experiences of feminist groups. And I personally believe that our hope lies today in the civil society organizations in general. And our hope also lies in organizations that are working on the promotion of women's rights. They have a role to play in advocacy, in exerting pressure, in conducting studies and research, in promoting the right to participation. In Arab countries, we have a lot of civil society organizations that are very active, and they should continue being active. What is the report that I would recommend to read? I say that there is no ideal report. I recommend you to read all of the reports in order to consider the positive points as well as the negative points in each report. And one last response, the effect of COVID-19 on women. We know that digitalization was an opportunity to work remotely, and women also have benefited from this digitalization. However, we have to be aware that this opportunity has also brought a lot of threats on Arab women. So first, the increase in violence percentages, violence rate, and second, there was a return of this mentality that women should stay at home. So some people said that this COVID-19 pandemic has shown that women can stay at home and work from home, and there is no need for them to go out. So we have to be very vigilant towards that. Thank you. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to thank the speakers. I would like to thank the participants for their questions. I am sorry for any interruption. And one last conclusion is that the gender equality remains one of the major challenges hindering sustainable development. Behter, I give you the floor. Behter or Zahra, I don't know who will now take the floor. Thank you.